The Orzhov Syndicate might think of themselves as the businessmen of Ravnica, but Manny would consider them more like the swindlers. Appropriately enough, their mechanic is called Extort. Extort tacks on a little extra life for you, and a little death for them, with every spell that you cast. The ghastly new Ghost Council, Obsidat, has convinced Todd Anderson to give you the rundown on how they work in Gatecrash Limited.
Hey guys, Todd Anderson here with a guild review for Orzhov. Traditionally, black-white has been one of my favorite color combinations for the entirety of the time I've played Magic. I'm very excited about Gatecrash and the Orzhov guild and all it has to offer. Today we're going to be talking about how to draft the deck, a couple of different cards that are good in the two different kind of decks that you want to build. First off, let's go and get started with the aggro deck. Now, Syndic of Tithes is the card that we want to start off with because Syndic of Tithes, I think, is the centerpiece of the Orzhov guild, whether you're drafting a control deck or an aggro deck. It's much better in the aggro deck because it's a grizzly bear that has Extort, but the fact that it does have Extort means that you want to draft it in both decks because Extort's just an insane mechanic. It's the only mechanic out of the set where you don't necessarily have to be attacking to make it good, but attacking makes it that much better. The second comment I want to talk about for the aggro deck is Kingpin's Pet, and now this one is just like Syndic of Tithes where you can draft it in both the aggro deck and the control deck and it's still very good. A 2/2 flyer for 3 mana is already a reasonable cost, and the fact that it has Extort makes it that much better. You'll probably be fighting over Kingpin's Pet with the control deck if there's one sitting next to you, but the fact that the commons go pretty deep in Orzhov means that you should be able to get at least a few of these guys for your deck. The third card, it's not really an Orzhov card, but it is a white card, is Daring Skyjack. This guy is a 3-power potential flyer for just 2 mana, and the fact that you can pair this along with your other cheap Extort creatures and just run them over really quick is pretty important. It's not the best for the deck since it doesn't have Extort, but it's still very good, and you will be fighting over cards like this with your Boros opponents to your right and left. The last card I want to talk about for the aggro version of the deck is Basilica Screecher. Another cheap Extort creature is very important for the aggro deck to have, but it's not necessarily the card that you want to first pick. Basilica Screecher is also very good in the Dimir decks because it is a cheap flyer, so you do have to take that in consideration when deciding whether to take it early or late. Now, the aggro deck that features these 4 aggressive common creatures also does like removal, but I think it's important to note that this deck particularly wants the creatures before the removal spells. A lot of the removal spells in Orzhov are more situational and are much more suited for the control deck. Let's go ahead and take a look at the top commons for the control deck that we're discussing. First off, I think Basilica Guards, 3 mana 1/4 with Defender with Extort, is the pinnacle card that you want in your deck. You want as many of these as you can. The format is so aggressive and so full of cheap creatures that having access to a 3 mana 1/4 is incredibly important for helping you stabilize, but it's also very good because it has Extort. Basilica Guards, basically the more you have the better, and you want to take it as highly as possible if you're in the control deck of Orzhov. Second up, we have Grizzly Spectacle. Now this card's a little expensive for what it does, and the effect is not necessarily an Orzhov effect. The milling is more of a Dimir effect, but the fact that it's a 4 mana, kill any creature is pretty huge for a control deck. Now, it is a little slow, like I said, so it's not going to match up well against Boros, but it is awesome against decks like Gruul, and being able to kill any creature that has Cypher is going to be incredibly important. Next up, we have Devour Flesh. This card, while it's not great at killing problematic creatures, it does help you kill an early creature and buy enough time to help stabilize the board. Giving them life is mostly irrelevant in a deck where you're going to be grinding them out, and you're going to be able to drain that life back with Extort eventually. Next up, we have Corpse Blockade. Very similar to Basilica Guards in the fact that it's a 3 mana 1/4 defensive creature, but you do have the ability to help kill more creatures in combat. It makes attacking a worse proposition for your opponent should you have a couple different creatures out that you don't mind sacrificing. A lot of times you're going to end up trading your 2 mana 1 power creature and it's going to be able to chump block something, and you're still going to be able to kill off a bigger creature that the opponent controls. Next up, we have Smite. And Smite is not really a card that I would think is that good, but in this particular deck, we have a ton of creatures that are very defensive, like the Basilica Guards, like the Corpse Blockade, that we're just going to put in front of a creature. That creature's not necessarily going to die, but we still need to be able to kill the creature. So Smite works very effectively in this regard. Next up, we have Executioner's Swing, and this card is very similar to Smite in what it does, except you have to take a little bit of damage first. Now, Executioner's Swing is much better at being able to kill a creature even if you don't have a blocker, and I think that that's the important difference between that and Smite. Smite is a little more situational than Executioner's Swing, though Executioner's Swing does ask you to take a little bit of damage before you're able to use it, but I guess that's what Orzhov's really all about anyway, right? Trading a little bit of life for a little bit of value. Next up, we're going to talk about the uncommons that we have in the set for Orzhov for both the aggro deck and the control deck. There are two important uncommons that stand out for the aggro deck, in my opinion. The first is Gift of Orzhov. This card allows you to not only race every other aggro deck in the format, but it also gives your biggest ground pounder flying. Gift of Orzhov is very similar to Spectral Flight in its execution, but the fact that you're giving the creature lifelink means it's going to be incredibly difficult for anyone to race you. Next up, we have Holy Mantle, and I think that the +2/+2 effect is going to be gigantic because there aren't very many cards in the set that give that big of a boost to a creature permanently. Holy Mantle also giving your creature protection from creatures means that you're going to be able to rumble through whenever you want to, and it's going to be very hard for other decks to race when they can't block your creature. For the control deck, specifically Guardian of the Gateless is going to be the top uncommon non-removal spell that you're going to want. Guardian of the Gateless comes down, can block any number of creatures, and is usually going to trade with all of them because the entirety of the format revolves around playing creatures early in the game and trying to kill your opponent before they stabilize. Guardian of the Gateless, one of the best stabilizers I've seen in a long time. The fact that it's going to be trading off with most of their entire board if they want to try to alpha strike you is huge. Now, the two decks do share a lot of uncommons, and those uncommons are important to note that they're going to be good regardless of what deck you're in, the aggro deck or the control deck. First up is Killing Glare. Killing Glare is very similar to Disembowel from the old Ravnica, but with Killing Glare, it's going to be a little easier to kill a creature because usually the power is not going to be higher than the cost. But Killing Glare is a very awesome uncommon. It's a solid removal spell, and you should take it very highly, even if you're not even in Orzhov, if you're in Dimir or whatever. But Killing Glare is just an awesome card. Next up, we have Orzhov Charm, and this is almost specifically just for the kill target creature ability. You're going to take a little bit of damage, but that's the trade-off you get for being able to kill any creature for 2 mana. You want this in the aggro deck and the control deck just because it's cheap, efficient removal. Next up, we have Knight of Obligation. This is a 4-mana extort creature with a very reasonable sized body. At 2/4, it's going to be incredibly difficult for anyone to kill, and it's going to block a lot of creatures in the format, and it has extort. It's going to go well in both the aggro deck and the control deck, though it does fit a little bit better in the control deck. And then last up, we have 1000 Lashes. This card, very similar to Pillory of the Sleepless. I would highly recommend it in the control deck. It's still fine in the aggro deck, but honestly, it's a little slow, so it's not that good against decks like Boros, and it's just okay against Blood Rush because they have the ability to pump any of their other creatures with their Blood Rush cards. Alright guys, well, that's Orzhov, how to draft it, I guess, or all the best cards for each of the 2 decks. Good luck out there, and don't forget to pay your extort.